All right, guys, I see Reagan and Sarah are here. I'm going to wait just a little bit more. I had a question. I'm going to check my email. I had a question, two questions yesterday actually, that came through about the knowre section 9.1 and wanted to make sure I addressed that right away. There was one that had to do with the first couple questions, and wanted to make sure I addressed that right away. And then there was another one that had to do with the questioning for number 3. So right now, those are the only 2 emails that came through. I want to make sure that we go over them so that you guys have all your questions answered. While I'm with the 2 of you, Reagan, is it, and Sarah, can you unmute yourself for a moment and let me know if you have any questions concerning grades, concerning assignments, what's due, when it's due, all of that stuff. So Scarlett, I know you just joined us. I was just asking you if you have any questions concerning any grades that have gone in, any assignments that you're looking to talk about or question. I want to make sure as we go over the 2 questions that I was given, that I give you guys the opportunity to ask anything that might be on your mind. So does anybody have any additional questions in general? All right. I will say that as of right now, I believe I have found all of the tests. I have graded all of the tests. I have graded all of the work I have. Obviously, I won't even look at the no reassignments to put them in the grade book until Sunday. But I just want to make sure that everybody is aware that I've been grading as they've been coming, and then just yesterday decided I'd put all of them in the grade book just to kind of keep everybody updated on everything. Please let everyone know that if they have any questions, they can still hand in their assignments. They do not have to take a 0 for it. I will adjust them accordingly because they're late, but please hand them in. All right, so I'm going to wait 30 more seconds, then I'm going to get started. I'm going to have to read that. It's going to be in the chapter. Okay, there. Helping with homework here as well. All right, so I'm not going to waste any more of your time. The first question that I was asked had to do with how to match up this. So when we went over our notes on Monday, and when we went over the notes on Wednesday, we needed to make sure that we kept in mind how these were similar. So one of the things that we did on Wednesday was this, and finding a pattern. And I'm not sure if that was your class or the other class, but here's also an example that we did on Wednesday to match that up. So if you're wondering, for those of you that are with me right now and may have that question, or if you're watching later and have that question, but from our notes on Monday, we talked about our 3 similar triangles. The right angles correspond and the reflexive angles correspond. So they're similar by angle, angle. And then what ends up happening is the other ones are, again, similar by essentially the transitive property. So if one of our reflexive angles happens to be here, the only other number that can be here is the other acute angle, and it will always have its own match. So it doesn't matter what number I put here, the other acute angle will be its complement every time. Over here was our other reflexive angle. So whatever I have here, the other complementary angle has to be here. And that's where that angles complementary to congruent angles are congruent. That whole idea, we have that here. So we have all these triangles with the same measures. First one's named, and we keep the same correspondence. So we find that pattern. In this one, we said 23, 67. Sorry, we started with this one. 23, 90, 67, 23, 90, 67. So everyone has to be 23, 90, 67, 23, 90, 67. That's just the pattern we had for this example. So what I did here was I already put in the reflexive angle. So if S is here, and we know S is our reflexive angle, it's a part of the large right triangle in this guy, it has to be over here. Every time it'll have to be over here. We also have the other reflexive angle up here at N. Well, if this guy's here, it's got to be here. These complements will have to match. So no matter what, the same tick marks you're going to see every time. So when we go to name, I chose to name this one orange, right, blue. So every time I do this, I'm going to go in the same order: orange, right, blue. So when I name this smaller triangle down here, I'm going to name it in the same order: orange, right, and blue. And that way I have the same pattern. Over here, I want to make sure I have the same pattern: orange, right, blue. So N, C, P. And that way I know that they've been named appropriately, because we know they're similar by angle, and we know that those acute angles have to match. So when I go to load this as the PDF, I'll put some of those notes in here for those that aren't going to listen and won't follow along. But again, it's that idea that when we have angle similarity, you have your large right triangle and you have the small one, so S is reflexive. We have our large right triangle and this one, so N is reflexive. That means this one's complement will always be, they'll always be the same. Angles complementary to congruent angles are congruent. So we get those complements to show up no matter what their numbers are. So hopefully that helped with that question, because that was one of them. And again, I'll put all those lovely notes in there. The next question that does that help those of you that are with me right now before I move on? Everybody's muted. I don't get to see anybody's lovely faces. Unfortunately, you can't see mine because when I take the hover cam out, I can't use I don't know. It's kind of weird. I have to figure that out yet. I haven't zoomed and taught enough to know how to make both work at the same time. Anybody have any questions on how to find that pattern or why? All right. Silence. The same like before. Just checking to see if we have any chats. All right. So let's talk about number 3. Number 3 was one that was also asked about. So I want to make sure that we go back and we take a look. Now from Monday, I'm going to go and I'm going to put our notes in from Monday when we talked about how they're all similar and we matched by the pattern. And then we talked about what a geometric mean is, that repeated side in our right triangles. It's like reflexes, but they don't correspond. And then we talked about how we can make that pattern. Now, one of the things I will say that I did reference, and I think I put it in your notes the other day, I broke the regular geometry class down a little bit different. And I went page by page where we talked about why they were similar. I have the pattern in here to make sure that they see that they have to still correspond. And then we went to this page where I will honestly say, we broke down the triangles and took every two sets of similar triangles to make them into the proportionality statement so that they can see that there's a side repeated, but because they're not in the same fraction, they don't correspond. And they're not in the same position of the fraction, so they don't correspond. So we have this idea that it's the same length, it's the same segment, they don't correspond. That's what a geometric mean is. So then we broke that down in practice. Now, for you guys, we did talk about the shortcuts for the formulas, and this is what I was getting to. Once we do that cross multiplication, each of those proportions now look like these formulas. So when we cross multiply, for instance, AD, in this picture, AD was a leg. But when we cross multiply, we have something squared equals these two multiplied together. Something squared, these two multiplied together. So that's what we have here with these formulas. That's one. And then it's not necessarily the letters, it's the positions. We talked about our geometric means come out of that right angle. This squared, and this squared will always be. And then everything on the other side is always products of these values here. So off the right angle is everything that gets squared. Those are the geometric means. What they are set equal to is everything across from the right angle. So on that hypotenuse, notice the X's, the Y's, and the C's, there's nothing else here. So we said, let's practice it again. Off the right angle was F, G, and C. That's all of these. Everything that it's equal to is the part and the whole hypotenuse over here. So F squared is the adjacent part times the whole hypotenuse. C squared, adjacent part, whole hypotenuse. G squared, PT. So everything that it's equal to is down here. And that again comes from not having to go through all these proportionality statements. So looking at number 3. If you recognize already what that formula is, do the work. You do not have to go through all the steps. So I did the first one already, recognizing that DB is out of this right angle. That means this guy is not only our altitude, but it's also a geometric mean. So what we want to make sure of is that we follow that pattern. It's our altitude. It's also one of the geometric means. So we are allowed to square it, and we end up setting it equal to the multiplication of its two parts. So we multiply those two together. 3 is a prime number, 5 is a prime number. So when we end up taking the square root of 15, we know we're done. This right here is kind of the formula wording wise, what we look at. Altitude squared equals part 1, part 2. So the altitude squared equals part times part. So to walk through a different strategy now, because I can come down here and I clicked to do number 3 again. So this was an actual number 3 in the knowre assignment. I clicked to do it again. This was the next one that popped up. Obviously very similar to this, but we're going to look at it as a different strategy right now. Instead of guessing which formula to use, the strategy that I think I want to use is I want to label everything and then write out all the formulas, because sometimes we just don't see it happening. So on the formula sheet that I showed you, we had A, B, we called this whole thing C, and we had an X and a Y over here. So I'm just going to stick with what that sheet said, and that one was Y. Doesn't matter what variables I used. I could have used LMNOP, doesn't matter. But I have these variables, And a strategy is, instead of guessing, write out all the formulas with the numbers and letters you see here. So off of this right angle, which are the three that get squared? Can anybody tell me without me having to wait painfully 20 seconds to hear an answer? No, I'm gonna get nothing. I know, it's fine. My 8-year-old's trying to make me feel better. Nobody knows? All right. If we are right here at the right angle, the three letters that are allowed, oh, we're gonna chat. We have one chat. 4, A, and B. Thank you, Natalie. Natalie didn't want to talk, but Natalie did help. Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate that. So, Natalie, also, I was able to figure out how to kind of see your stuff. If you have and want to send it again, and then maybe I can check to make sure I graded it correctly, please do so. Otherwise, you'll notice that a grade did go in the grade book. There was just a couple that were fuzzy and I wasn't quite sure what it was. So I did my best. I'm not sure if it was just the movement of the camera or the phone. I'm not sure. So I just wanted to let you know that I did my best with that. So if you're concerned, send me another copy. So yes, you are correct. The three that we want to square is A squared, 4 squared, and B squared. Each of those are our geometric means. And A squared, can anybody tell me or type, is going to be equal to what times what? Or what's 4 squared going to be equal to? Or what's B squared going to be equal to? All right, let's see. Sarah, you are correct. 3 times, so we do have A squared equals 3 times C. You are correct with that whole AD. And 4 squared is 16, and that's all I've got. So what we're looking at is what are the formulas. So we want to match the formulas just like we had for our similar work. Four squared equals 3 times y. Good. So part times part. So we had leg squared equals the adjacent part times the whole hypotenuse. Again, leg squared equals adjacent part times the whole hypotenuse. Altitude squared equals part times part. So what's b squared gonna? Good. B squared is y times c. Thank you very much. And again, notice everything that's on this side all comes from the pieces and parts or the whole hypotenuse. Everything over here that gets squared all comes off of that letter B. So what I did here was decided to do number 3 with a different strategy. Instead of just knowing what to do, I said, let's not guess. Let's fill everything in and let's write all 3 formulas out and then decide, what am I able to do? Thankfully, I don't need to worry about this guy or this guy because they're not part of the question. The only one I really care about is this one. So all 3 formulas are correct. The one that I want to worry about is this guy. So you are correct. We are going to have 16 equals 3y. And when I divide by 3, I end up with y equals 5 1/3. and make sure, because I don't know, maybe this was the issue, when you put it in knowre, it wants those exact values. So it is going to ask for you to put it in as a fraction. And remember that in the knowre assignment, it will pop up that you have those icons that you click on for fraction, for segment, for triangle, all that stuff. But I think the triangle's already printed in the question, so you should be safe there. So those were the two questions that I had in the computer waiting for me to talk about today. Was there anything else that you would like to clarify before we finish up for today? Anything that you were concerned about? I do know, as you think and get enough nerve to speak, I had someone respond to me in Google Classroom, and they had, I think yesterday at the beginning of the day, I had 103 unanswered emails, and that was because I was collecting, obviously, the written work that were being uploaded and pictures were being taken. So I had quite a few emails to go through just yesterday, and that was after having already graded stuff days before. And some stuff was sent to email, some stuff was uploaded in Google Classroom. And I am good with that now that I know to look where I'm looking. The issue is I was grading till probably 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock every night this week, making sure that I was not falling behind or frustrating anybody, knowing that we can't talk on a day-to-day basis. So while I was looking in Google Classroom, I commented to a student that it hadn't been uploaded, that it hadn't been officially turned in. So it said that she had something there, but when I clicked on the place for the PDF, there was nothing loaded. So I had just made a comment, just wanted to let you know that it says you turned something in, but there was nothing uploaded. Apparently they weren't very happy with that, even though it was just an FYI, all good. Made some comment back about, obviously I know that because I emailed it to you instead. So I was very calm, obviously, professional, and stated it was very late. This was the first place I looked, wanted to let you know. You can obviously see it was updated in the grade book. Thank you for making sure you did the effort to email. I appreciate that. So I know everybody is very out of sorts still after 6 weeks of being kind of at home and away from school, which 6 weeks just boggles my mind right now that we've been that long. But please make sure, no matter who it is, who your teachers are, if it's me or if it's somebody else, when you are turning in your work, and if you don't see it, I've said it before, advocate for yourself. Nobody's feelings will be hurt if you are doing your part, and that is just to double check. Just make sure that you understand that everybody is working very hard, and if for some reason something slips through the cracks, I am certain we can all understand why. I know I am doing probably more than I should be just because I have to stay busy. I don't do nothing well. It's very uncomfortable. I can't recall the last time I just sat and read a book. So, in fact, the only time I read is when I'm running. So it's very weird, but just make sure if something is missing or if something doesn't seem right, just email, because we're not talking as much as I thought the Zooms would entice us to talk. We're not. So know that I should have everything updated in the grade book. Everything should be graded appropriately. Natalie, I did say, and this isn't just Natalie, there was probably about 5 or 6 people that I've had to ask to send stuff back. And I don't know if it looks better at your end than it does after it travels through the waves and into my computer. But it was very, very hard to read some tests. And Natalie, yours was not nearly as bad as others. So thank you. But it's always just good to double check. So if you're wondering why I'm asking for those to be sent back, it's a good thing. I am not suggesting that it's a necessity. I am saying if you are doing your due diligence, don't throw anything now ever away. kind of organize your stuff into maybe a box or a crate or binders or folders for any class, not just mine, but any class. Now more than ever, you want to make sure that you keep everything as record, just to make sure that we don't lose anything. And if for some reason it needs to be referenced later. So that's just another good suggestion. I know I babbled. I wanted to cover a whole bunch of stuff. So hopefully you guys, I answered some of your questions, even though there weren't any asked. Do you guys have anything else, or we can be done for the day? And just make sure you work on your knowre assignments, and we'll go from there. Did anybody start the 9-2 assignment that's here with me right now? I know I've looked in there, but I can't recall off the top of my head what you guys have done. Did anybody look at the 9-2 assignment? Okay, I wasn't sure. Was it easy enough, Reagan? Did you think so? I know we didn't specifically go over a whole bunch this week with the Pythagorean theorem, but I do know that we've done so much with it, I didn't want to kind of bore us to death. Did you find it okay? Yeah, I will agree. I was surprised. I got 0 questions on the last 3 because I looked at those specifically. They were multiple parts, and it did make us use a little bit more. Yeah, it did make us kind of think a little bit more with the Pythagorean theorem than we had done in the past. So if for some reason, um, you think that that's something I should go over on Monday even, just shoot me an email, let me know. I know the 2 of you are finished, but it might be something worthwhile to look at for everyone. Not sure, maybe it's just a good thing that we got a little bit of a challenge. I don't know. So, all right, well, then I hope you guys have a great weekend. Get out, get some fresh air. It's still so daggone cold, but I hope you guys can enjoy your weekend, and we will be back on Monday. So have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you. Even though we didn't get to talk, I appreciate you being here today. So thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Yay, that was nice.